Hey guys, welcome to the Classic Guitar Rock channel. And I just had some time, and I just wanted to go live and talk for a bit. There's a few items in the news that I wanted to talk about, and to be honest, part of the reason I want to go live is just kind of getting familiar with using the StreamYard app that we use. And so I would love to hear your comments as we get into this few items in the news that we can talk about. One thing that I do want to talk about, and this is an ongoing rant of mine, so I apologize. But the one thing I talk about is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductees that have been announced over the last couple days, and this kind of launches myself and a lot of folks into a lot of heated conversations about the said Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So here's one thing that one point I need to make before I launch here. As a museum, okay, and I've talked to a number of folks, including Dan Ranke, who's our blogger on the website, into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I know other folks that have actually been to the hall and visited the museum, and they've said it's really cool. I mean, it's a real cool place to visit. There are awesome, exhibits, and it's a cool place to go. So as a museum goes, I don't want to badmouth the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. However, in terms of the inductions that they've made over the years, I've referred to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a big steaming pile of poo, and I stick by that description. Okay. Now, a broken clock is right twice a day. What do I mean by that? I mean, yeah, obviously they've inducted good bands. That's not the problem. The problem usually comes in that there's a number of good deserving bands that haven't been inducted, and there's a number of bands that have been inducted that they have no reason being even mentioned in the same sentence with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And that happens every year, right? Every year there's someone that goes in and you kind of scratch your head. And then there's those glaring omissions of bands that should have been in there years ago. And guys, do you realize that Yes did not get in until about 4 or 5 years ago, after Chris Squire had already passed away? It's ridiculous. It's a joke. Do you realize Kiss didn't get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame till after 2000? I don't remember the year they went in, the early 2000s. Kiss should have been in there the very first year they were eligible, but they weren't. Again, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a joke. It's in the title, Hall of Fame. Fame. What qualifies you to go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? In my mind, it's you got to play rock and roll, and you got to have some fame. So why in the heck are Nina Simone and Tom Waits in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? And that's nothing against Tom Waits or Nina Simone, but should they be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? It's ridiculous. Dolly Parton. Love Dolly Parton to death. She is awesome. I love her. She should be nowhere near the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and yet she was inducted this year. Dolly, and this speaks to her character, Dolly a few months ago said, hey, I don't nominate me. There are far more deserving rock artists that need to go in before me. So kudos to her, but they still nominated her, and she's she will humbly accept the induction, but even she knows there's no reason for her to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay. So every year around this time, I pull my hair out and I whine and I complain and I, moan about how crappy the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is. And I will continue to do so. But having said that, there are some bands this year that got inducted. Most of them, it should have happened sooner, but hey, at least they're in there. Judas Priest made it finally. They should have been in there 20 years ago. Pat Benatar, excited about that. Even Duran Duran, I'm okay with Duran Duran being in there. They were video pioneers. They were on the new wavy side, but they definitely had a lot of success. They meet the fame definition of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They're playing rock. I have no problem at all with Duran Duran being in there. Carly Simon. I don't, is she rock and roll? I don't know. And that's one of the things people say is maybe it should just be the Music Hall of Fame. Well, maybe so, but guess what? It ain't. It's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So if you want to change it to the Music Hall of Fame, that's okay. But it's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So should Carly Simon be? I don't know. Did she ever do anything rock and roll? I don't know. As I think of her songs, it's all pretty mellow. And I love Carly Simon. It's not about whether the artists are any good or not. It's about, did they play rock and roll? Chase the Heat, thank you for your comments. He says, if there was a folk hall of fame, she should be in there. Absolutely. If there was a folk hall of fame, Carly should actually be in there. And maybe even Dolly Parton has a better chance fitting in the folk hall of fame. She's already in the country hall of fame, right? But yeah, it's just crazy. It's crazy. Now here's a suggestion. Oh, before I get to this, let me share with you all the nominees. Pat Benatar, Duran Duran, Dolly Parton, Lionel Richie, Carly Simon. Now, here's what's interesting. Oh, and also Eminem. That is so stupid, right? And this is the whole line of debate. Rap artists. Should rap artists be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? What do you guys think? I have no problem saying that a country artist or folk artist shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Should a rap artist be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? I personally, I don't think Eminem should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I don't think he should be. But he's in there. So again, Pat Benatar, Duran Duran, Eminem, Eurythmics, Dolly Parton, Lionel Richie, and Carly Simon as performers. So they are inducted as performers. Judas Priest is nominated via the Musical Excellence Award. I'm not sure what the difference is. So Judas Priest is not in there as a performer, but for the Musical Excellence Award. And I think maybe they do that for those bands that they know they overlooked for way too long, and they'll look like idiots if they just put them in as a performer for the first time. Because Judas Priest, they should have been in there 25 or 30 years ago. You know, they should have been in there the first time they were available. What is it 20 years or 25 years? I think it might be 20 years after they've been in the business. I don't remember the actual rules, but there were several bands that were overlooked for so long. Kiss, Deep Purple, Yes, many of these bands, and sadly they wait till the people have started dying until they start inducting them. Judas Priest, fortunately, all the folks are still alive that are going to be inducted. But again, way too long, way overdue, but at least they are finally going in. But it's interesting that those bands went in as performers, where Judas Priest went in as via the Musical Excellence Award. So here's what you need to do. There, you can find this on YouTube. There's a wonderful clip of Steve Miller at the little press conference after being inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was inducted the same year Cheap Trick was, and I can't remember. Some rapper went in the same time they did. So it's still not sure I'm good with rappers going into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but whatever. But Steve Miller he takes the hall to task, and it's a beautiful thing to see. So much so that there's a point where the lady kind of running the show is trying to shoo him off the stage, and she's like, no, I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to be quiet. I got the mic and I want to say this. And so he just keeps going. And he's making the point that the whole induction ceremony, the whole process, it's political, number one, right? And secondly, he said it's a joke. It's a money-making opportunity for the hall because they charge. Okay, so like Steve Miller, because he's the one being inducted, I think he and his wife get a free ticket. And it's not cheap to attend the induction ceremony. It's like thousands of dollars, right? So he and his wife get tickets to go. But like band members, people that aren't actually being inducted but were part of the thing, they have to pay, and it's like $10,000 a pop or something ridiculous. And so he's talking about how I can invite one person to come with me and everyone else has to pay $10,000 or whatever. But he's just taking them to town about how they've, first of all, overlooked artists that should be in there, how they try and make money off of people that do get inducted. It's just kind of fun to watch. So I feel much better talking about that. If you got any comments, Chase the Heat, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for your comments. If any of the rest of you have any comments, all three of us or four of us or however many are on here, chime in. Let me make a plug right now. If you are a follower of the podcast, first of all, if you don't follow the podcast, let me invite you to do that. The Classic Guitar Rock podcast, we're available on all the major platforms. And the website, classicguitarrock.com, check that out. It's a great site. We are adding a blog. We've got a post up already. Dan Ranke is our blogger. He does a great job. You'll be seeing more from Dan in the coming weeks. We're trying to tweak some things on the site to make it a little easier to get to the blogs and some other things. So check out the website, classicguitarrock.com. And I plugged on the last podcast episode that we now have a weekly radio show called the Classic Guitar Rock Time Machine. And it sounds like it's just what it sounds like, right? We go back in time, we pick out a certain year, we play great music and talk about those years. And it's a lot of fun to do. It's available on several internet radio stations, or you can check it out on our YouTube channel. So check that out for sure. Another news item that I wanted to talk about. And guys, you notice we try and steer clear of politics, right? Politics is the last thing we ever want to talk about on this channel or on the podcast, because politics can cloud us or keep us from enjoying great music. Great music is great music. I don't care about the politics of the performer. If I like the music, I like the music. And some performers on both sides of the aisle just kind of ruin it for about half of the potential audience who might have a different political persuasion, right? And for instance, a couple cases, Neil Young's deal with Joe Rogan a few months back. I won't get into all that, right? But Ted Nugent on the other side of the aisle, right? I love Ted Nugent. Ted is a very controversial guy because he's so outspoken about his politics, and that really pisses a lot of people off, turns a lot of people off from great music. Ted had about 4 albums in the 70s that are, in my mind, some of the best rock guitar albums ever, right? But because of he is who he is, so many people won't listen to that music. Now, why am I saying this? And this will launch me into my other big rant about something else that I laugh at. This doesn't make me mad. I just laugh at it because it's so silly. And that's Rolling Stone. Okay. Rolling Stone magazine, anytime they do these lists, they are so ridiculous. They are just so incredibly ridiculous. Whether it's their top 500 songs of the last 20 years, or the top 100 guitarists. They're a complete joke. And it's a cross between just being idiots and trying to make it look like they're smarter than everyone else, right? There's an old adage that said, those people that can't play music become critics. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? Is you have a lot of these critics that think they are the arbiters of what's good and in music, and most of the time they're just idiots and don't know what they're talking about. Rolling Stone, perfect example. So what does this have to do with Ted Nugent? Well, last year, the end of last year, the Rolling Stone posted their 100 top guitarists ever. On the list of the 100 top guitarists was Joan Jett. I love Joan Jett. This is not about Joan Jett. I love Joan Jett. Joan Jett is not a good guitar player. Okay? She's not bad. She plays rhythm guitar and she plays what she needs to play. But to put her on the list of the top 100 guitarists is ridiculous. And Ted Nugent said that. Ted Nugent basically said, anyone that puts, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, anyone that puts Joan Jett on the top 100 lists of guitarists is an idiot. And I tend to agree with Ted on this point. Joan Jett should be nowhere near the top 100 guitarists. Not a bad, that's, neither should John Lennon, right? There's lots of great musicians that aren't one of the top 100 guitarists. Okay. Bruce Springsteen has been on one of those top 100. Bruce Springsteen is not a great guitarist. Doesn't mean he's bad. That's not his role. Bruce Springsteen's role is not to be a great guitar player. He plays what he needs to play, right? Joan Jett is not a great guitar player. She should not be on the list of the 100 top guitar players. And that's what Ted said. Okay. And Ted is not on the list of 100 top guitarists. And in my mind, he absolutely should be. You think about influential guitar players, I think Ted Nugent should be on the top 100. Why is he not? Why is he not? Because a lot of people think he's an a-hole, right? It's politics. His politics are the opposite of Rolling Stone's politics. So that's why he's not on their list. It's as simple as that. It doesn't change the fact that what Ted Nugent said is true, that Joan Jett should not be anywhere near the top 100 list of guitar players. Simple as that. And I bring that up because Joan responded back to Ted, saying he's a jerk and she might be right about that. That's not my point. My point is, Rolling Stone, again, another idiotic list that they've made about the 100 guitar players, top 100 guitar players. Joan Jett should not be on that list. Ted Nugent, I think, should be. Should he be in the top 10? No. But should he be midway on that list? Top 70, top 80? Absolutely. He should be. Guys, listen to the first Ted Nugent album. That's a phenomenal album. Okay. Anyways, that's the other thing I just got me going when I saw that is of course they want to play up the fact that I'm looking at I'm on Ultimate Classic Rock right now, and they have the whole thing. Joan Jett responds to Ted Nugent. Well, what Ted Nugent was saying was not really an attack on Joan Jett. It was an attack on how stupid this list is. And I do have to agree with him. Joan Jett should not be anywhere near that list. Okay. So fascinating. And one other thing, we mentioned it on our last podcast episode, and that is this Van Halen thing. This Van Halen, I don't want to call it a reunion, but this tour that they're talking about doing, that both Joe Satriani and Jason Newsted have been talking with the Van Halen camp about. It's fascinating. And there's really some truth to it. So it will be interesting to see what materializes and how that materializes over coming months, because there's a couple interesting wrinkles about that whole thing. Number one, David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar famously don't click. They don't get along. And guys, let's think about this. There's a thing in rock and roll called LSD. And I'm not talking about the LSD you think I am, because there's a lot of that in rock and roll. But lead singer's disease. And what is lead singer's disease? Well, lead singers famously have big egos. And you think about it, they kind of need to. The best lead singers, think about them, I think they probably all have big egos, right? David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar, Ronnie James Dio, David Coverdale, whatever. Think of great lead singers. I bet you they've got big egos. So you got Sammy and Dave. They've never got along. So that's one dynamic. How are you going to make that work? Because according to Joe, he says, Joe Satriani, he says this would be a celebration of the entire Van Halen concept. I don't know, every era, right? So obviously we got the Dave era, we got the Sammy era, we got the Gary Sharon era. So how would you make that work? You'd have to do some songs with Dave, some with Sam, Gary's couple songs with Gary, one song with Gary. Do you do any songs with Gary? I don't know. I mean, what's his role in this whole thing? But the biggest question for me is, I have not seen mention of Michael Anthony yet. And he's that's what surprised me. And what would Jason Newsted's, are they going to have Jason Newsted come and play bass instead of Michael? Why would they do that? That seems crazy. So I don't know what this is, but this story still has legs. So Joe was talking about it, and Jason Newsted was talking about it, and this will be interesting to watch and see how it plays out. I haven't heard, unless I've missed something here about it, that Wolfgang, has he chimed in? I can't recall seeing anything about that. But it will be interesting to see if this, in fact, does plan out. Here's the thing about Van Halen, which is really interesting. And even when they were still a band, they were this way. They are not they're a very, very tight-lipped organization. You don't hear anything out of the camp, and you never heard anything out of the brothers, right? When Eddie was still alive, you'd never hear anything about what their plans were. They just were not very talkative in terms of letting folks know what was going on with their band. And that's unfortunate, because it's kind of died off. But I can remember 10 or 15 years ago, at least in rock circles, people were clamoring for Van Halen. They're like, why aren't you guys doing anything? Where are you guys? I mean, here was one of the biggest bands in the world that kind of just left, right? And there was a huge audience, still a huge audience. And there was never anything from them as far as what was going on, what fans could be expecting, or whatever. I remember back in 2004, they did that brief reunion tour with Sammy. And I had the fortune or misfortune of seeing that show. And it was clear that, it was clear that no one was really having fun on that tour. I mean, you could tell. Eddie was not doing well. And guys, this is not an exaggeration. His solo part and I don't mean this to sound disparaging, I just share this, you know, just to kind of give you a picture of what it was like. But the solo spot that Eddie always does, which is always a high point, if you've seen Van Halen live, this was my third time seeing them. It's always a high point, right? But much of his solo was literally him laying on his back on the stage, just letting his guitar feedback. You know, he did some of the, you know, the eruption stuff that you expect, but it was just, it was sad. It was sad. I remember seeing that, and it was just evident that Eddie was not himself. He wasn't doing well. And that show, it was like they were going through the motions, which was sad to see. Now, the good news is that Eddie did, after that, I think he entered rehab after that, and he went through a period there where he was looking a lot better, and he was a lot healthier, and he seemed a lot happier. Sadly, we lost him to cancer. They did have some good years after that, and again, they did the new album with David Lee Roth. Like, when was that? 2012, 2011, sometime around there, and he was doing great then. So that was good to see that turnaround. Obviously, a tragedy that we lost him to cancer. But I just hope whatever they do, it's something that family think that was awesome. That was a fitting tribute to one of the greatest rock bands ever. That's what I'm hoping. So I'm on Ultimate Classic Rock, so I wanted to just look at this really quick. So it says Joe Satriani, he has been in talks with Alex Van Halen and David Lee Roth about a potential Van Halen tribute tour. Quote, I've been talking with Alex and Dave for about a year about doing something, a tour, something like that was going to be a true tribute to Eddie and the Van Halen legacy, the guitarist told the Rock of Nations with Dave Kinchin. That's a podcast, Rock of Nations, Dave Kinchin podcast. Satriani admitted it was daunting, but he was up to the task. And he says, for me, it was a terrifying prospect of doing something like that. But I realized it was something that would be a real labor of love for me. He said, I was just so honored to take on the challenge. And that came on the heels of Jason saying that he had received an invitation from Alex Van Halen to jam with him and Satriani. He says, quote, there's nobody that can top it, so how do you show it honor? Newstead said, I didn't want it to be viewed as a money grab, and then it kind of just all fizzled. So he sounds like, from his end, it seems like it fizzled. So anyways, here's the part that's interesting. When asked whether Sammy Hagar was being considered for the tour, Satriani suggested it would account for all of Van Halen's catalog. Quote, the thought of representing all the eras of Van Halen, that's pretty daunting, he said, just from a guitar player's point of view. Eddie progressed remarkably as a player and as an inventor, and those two things, they kind of went together from Van Halen 1 all the way to the last album. And when you sit down to actually learn it and pull it off, you go, wow, not only do I need talent, but I need certain gear, because certain things won't work unless you've got this amp and it's doing that. So that's also another thing to deal with. Satriani says, despite Newsted's comments, the tour has not been ruled out entirely. So again, according to Newsted, it fizzled out. According to Joe, he said it hasn't ruled. Maybe they've just ruled out using Newsted, which, nothing against Newsted. Why would they use him when they could use Michael Anthony? That's my big beef. Michael Anthony should be all over in these conversations, right? Where is he? This is Satriani, quote, it's very complicated, and all I can really say about it is that if it does happen, I know we'll make it the greatest thing ever for the fans, and we'll all celebrate together. Wow. So, well, that'll be interesting to see. And we won't know until we know, right? I would just love to see anything that looks like a tribute to Van Halen. I think it would be cool. I would hope that they find a way to make it work with Dave, with Sammy, with Michael. The reality is Dave loved Dave to death, but he's kind of done singing, right? Not sure how much of his own material he could do. Sammy, gosh, Sammy's 75, 76. The guy can still sing. He could totally do it. And Michael, who's playing with Sammy, that's what blows me away. Satriani, Hagar, they've both played a lot with Mike. I'm surprised Joe didn't mention Mikey in this conversation as well. I don't know. Why did Alex reach out to Jason Newsted and not Mike? I don't know. We'll see. It's interesting. So, guys, I just wanted to come on and rant about a few of those things. I appreciate all of you that watch the channel. Appreciate all of you that check out the podcast. If you haven't checked out the podcast yet, again, please do so. It's available on all the major platforms. And check out the radio show, Classic Guitar Rock Time Machine. The last episode, which just dropped this past week, is 1967. So that was fun. That's the year I was born. So it's kind of fun to go back and play that music from the year that I was born. Coming up, this is top secret info. I haven't shared this with the affiliates yet. Coming up, we're going to do 1976. And if you thought there were a lot of great albums in 78, man, 76 had a lot of great albums also. So that will be the next episode. Anyways, guys, take care. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks for watching the channel. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please take a minute and do that. And we'll see you next time here at the Classic Guitar Rock channel. Take care. Bye-bye.